Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us in this month's installment of the New Normal in Government Contracting. I am so lucky to have another one of my friends and clients with me today. Jennifer Collins is the President and CEO of JDC Events. JDC Events is an event planning company that delivers a fresh, polished, and inspired approach to event and design management. I personally am also a client of JDC Events, so I am so glad to have you. Thanks so much for being with us today, Jennifer.
Very happy to be with you, Courtney, as always.
So this is something I wanted to talk about for a little bit because obviously in 2021, we had a full year of actual operating under the new normal. And I think for your industry, almost more than any other, it was so changing in terms of how things were handled. So tell me what you think about business in 2022 and sort of what some of those overall changes are, and then we'll talk a little bit about the trends that you've given us as well.
Yeah, what's interesting is that we have gone through so many windows from the start of the pandemic in 2020, and then of course 2021. They were still changing windows, especially with the emergence of all the vaccines and people starting maybe to come back together. And then, of course, we were hit with the Delta and then later Omicron. And so people really right now are just now starting to go back in person. They still are doing it. There are still many people that I see that I've seen at many of our events that this is their first event since 2019.
I had mine yesterday. Yep.
Exactly. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's still a thing. And there are still some who are still concerned because maybe they have young children or immunocompromised. There's still issues in the sense of, how do we still go back safely, even though there are others who have totally just disregarded it and they're ready to move on. So you get all sorts of ends of the pendulum. But as an event person, we have to listen to all of those and we have to build the best pathway forward that we can, and working with our clients on how to make sure that we are building an environment that people feel safe in, for one, and that they want to come to, but also to really push the value of it. Because, I've been traveling now for the past several months or since last year. And what I do see is that there is an energy and a buzz when people are back together. And many people say it. It's just so good to be together again. So there's value in it in the sense of it's just us as people. But there's also value in it in the sense of the purpose and the reasoning behind why you are coming together.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. The event that I attended yesterday was a GovMates event, and it was literally my first event of the year. And I have 4 or 5 conferences scheduled in the next 6 months. So everyone's trying to cram in, I think, in the second half of the year, including the Government Procurement Conference. It'll be at the DC Convention Center.
Excellent.
And I get different varying degrees of, I want to be safe, or, I thank goodness we're getting back together again, as you say.
Yeah.
You were kind enough to give us an article on trends, conference trends in 2020. What do you think? Tell me some of the most important of those that you want to mention, and how you think they relate to federal events as well, because our audience are all government contractors. And I know, I get varying, I'm so glad that I don't have to be in DC to go to that. And when are we going to be able to meet in person with our potential clients? So tell me what you think.
Well, I think that one of the major things that I do know is that we cannot go back to 2019. And so for those, I'm sorry to disappoint you, for those that are still wanting to do that, 2019 is gone. We are just even not the same people that we were in 2019. So that's one aspect. And why I really want to hone in on that is because that really dictates how you move forward in terms of the events that you want to produce. When you talk about the government, one thing I do see with the government that I think they will stick with is the digital event. the virtual. I think, some of the OSDBU meetings or the trainings or certain types of summits, we're seeing a lot of RFPs still from the federal government that are still virtual. We've been doing, of course, hybrid, in person and virtual for the government, but we still see a lot more that are specifically virtual. So I think that's one thing that the government will continue to do, just because of the fact of it's convenient for one, but I also think that they found that it really can be effective for them, in the sense of it's easier. You can potentially get more people, more speakers, just different types of subject matter experts, perhaps, that they maybe would not have been able to get before. So we're seeing that across the board. So that's, I think, one thing that's very important in the sense of understanding the possibilities that they now have with this particular medium, but also understanding, though, that virtual is not replacing in person. There's been this discussion that in person is always better, but it's just, they're not mutually exclusive. An in-person event and a virtual one, they're not. Right. They're just tools, and they each have different types of practices and different benefits. And so that's just something to remember in the sense of when people are moving forward. But we do see that the government is using a lot of the virtual capacity as well.
Yeah, I do think that reach has gotten so much better. So for people that weren't necessarily in the Beltway, as I said, I find especially the OSDBUs and the others have been able to garner a much greater audience, as you said, which is just different.
Yeah, it is. And, it also presents the opportunity to provide micro type of events, in the sense of, the days of people are still doing large events. Don't get me wrong, they're still happening, large trade shows, conferences, all of that. But I do think the micro event has really taken shape just because of the fact of when we initially were dealing with, potential super spreaders or, issues with having a large amount of people together because of the virus situation, that people in the smaller realms could control it better. And so those sorts of events, I think, have really been more, if you want to say, not creative per se, but they're just more targeted and specific. And so, and that really can help to regenerate your audience in the community that you're talking to, where you don't really have to have that larger impact, but you really have a dedicated approach and a dedicated target for a group of people that truly are the heartbeat of what you need in the sense of your event being successful. They really are the ones that you need to have there. We don't need to have everybody else per se, and it's still successful in so doing. So that's something that we've seen as well that has been really, really effective.
I think that's a really good point. I've also seen the matchmaking events be far more successful digitally, only because the level of person that will do that electronically, as you said, or your SMEs, is slightly higher than the person that may have traveled to that location to do the matchmaking. So I think each has its place, as you said. The mutually exclusive model doesn't work for me either. I really want to see a lot of both. If I'm a GovCon company, what should I keep in mind when attending this event? Whether it's virtual or whether it's a conference, how am I going to get the most out of an event that an OSDBU or a government agency is putting on for the GovCon industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think with the virtual, if it is that type of event, that with virtual, it depends upon how it was built. There are some virtual events that really aren't built with engaging type, tactics and ways for people to connect and talk to each other. So we can't, like this, we can see each other, but some don't have that. And so they just may have the chat feature. So that can sometimes be limiting in the sense of, well, how can I get in front of somebody? How can I really engage with them? So you do have to create more of a pathway of how you're going to do that, after the event. If it's before the event, who's coming. Are you going to, connect with them on LinkedIn, or, try to chat to get their email, or some sort of way you're going to have to make an effort to try to engage with them. In person, of course, is a little easier because you can see them and you can talk to them, and then you can find some sort of way to connect and engage with them. But the engagement part is something that I'm seeing with many of our events that has been lost over the past couple of years. And because of that, people are now clamoring to be seen and clamoring to be in front of people that can truly help and they can keep up with. And in person, of course, it's easier to do that. I'm not saying that it can't be done, as I've noted, virtually. It just takes more effort to
To be
make sure.
diligent.
You have to be diligent. Exactly. You're going to have to reach out to them after the fact. And it just depends, again, on how the event was built and if it was built to have those engagement types of activities to help you with that.
Great. The trend article that you gave to us, and by the way, is posted on the Global Services blog site if our listeners want to take a read. One of the things that you said really resonates with me, which is that because we've moved to virtual work environments, and that's true for myself, we have decided to stay virtual. The pandemic completely changed us and how we interact. But it requires a greater level, and this is sort of what you outlined in your article, it requires a greater level of events specific to your company, to keep the company culture, to keep not losing, whether those things are virtual or whether they're in person, and hopefully some combination thereof. But are you seeing a lot more intercorporate events to sort of help companies with the things that I'm talking about?
Yeah, remote work, remote work is not new, as we know. It's just everybody was forced into it because of the crisis that we were in. So, but not everybody was built for it either, because it was just one of those things where even those that were doing it for a long time, they weren't doing it in the way that we had to do it starting in March 2020. So even in that, there was a learning curve. What we're seeing, though, is that, yes, there are many corporations and companies that we've come across that are looking for ways to bring their teams together because of the fact of many of them may be spanning across continents or across the country, or it even could be within the states that they're in. But there has to be a way for them to connect and engage. And so it's also something where they're trying to figure out how to do it. Is that a team building? We're seeing a lot more team building and corporate coming together, corporate types of events where people are brought together to learn about the company, but also to connect and engage with each other. Because when you think about it, during this time frame, there are many people that were hired, and many of these people have not met their coworkers or their bosses,
right? Yeah,
in person. And so and they could be living in different locations. And so that's a large part of what we're seeing now, is that there's this need to come together, even though we're still technically going to be a remote workforce.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Certainly true for my team. You were kind enough to help us with a holiday event. We did a gingerbread building together. But they are the kinds of team things that we really miss. We do see each other every day on stand up, but it's not the same. And doing things together and those team building activities are really important. For those that might be interested in those kinds of activities, tell us how JDC can help make an impact and how your firm handles some of those things for companies like myself.
Oh, sure. Happy to. It really starts with your strategy. What is it that you're trying to achieve? What is your objective? What do you want to see this particular event do? How do you want people to come together? So we work with you on that strategic council first to understand what the goals and the objectives are. And then we'll design strategies. We'll design, different activations on what that might look like. It very well could be something where you're bringing people together, cooking types of things together, demonstrations of some sort, or, maybe you're doing content at a certain period of time during the day where you have panel presentations or people that are speaking or trainings or workshops, whatever it might be. But then in the evening or throughout the day, depending, you're bringing people together in some way where they can just connect, engage, not be structured, if you will, in the sense of, content, which is important in the sense of you want to make sure the company goals are expressed and everybody is on board with that. But it's just really a way as well to build in white space. That's one thing that I'm still not seeing a lot of right now. And what I mean by white space is that it's not structured, meaning keep in mind, people haven't seen each other in a while, if at all. And so you need to build in that time for them to just be with each other. And that is most definitely and often through some form of an activity, but it has to be built in because otherwise, you very well could lose them in the sense of their attention because they don't know each other. There's no way for them to have known each other, especially if they are new to a company or they're not in the same location and they may not see each other outside of this particular time that you're bringing them together. So it's very, very important to build in that white space, but also it's important because of the mental health that we've all been going through, with this pandemic. It's just important to think about that in the sense of the care and the well-being of people that you're bringing together.
Totally agree. How can our viewers get in touch with you if they're interested?
Well, they are more than welcome to visit us on our website, which is jdc-events.com. And you also can reach me individually at jennifer@jdc-events.com.
That's so great. Thank you. I am going to give you sort of the last thought of the day. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. This is something that's been on my mind because I'm a very social person, and I've really been thinking about how to engage my team, how do I engage in the government space, what does this all look like? So I appreciate you being here. But I want to give you the last thought of the day.
Well, first and foremost, I just really appreciate this opportunity. Courtney, we've had a long relationship working together, and it has been a great one. And so I'm just so thankful that it's continuing in that sense. And I think, when we're thinking about moving forward in terms of the event space, since, that's my discipline that I'm in, it's just to really lead with empathy. And I say that because of the fact of what I see a lot of is people who they're just ready to move forward and they want to put the past behind us. And I totally understand it and I'm with them. But as I mentioned before, we are not the same people that we were in 2019. Right. Many have experienced great tragic losses. In some way, shape, or form, we all were transformed. And so it's just important to lead with empathy when you're building your events, to understand that, yes, the majority may be ready to move forward, but there still is a microcosm of your audience that you may be targeting that is not, or has hesitations, or in some way, shape, or form may not consider this to be the best way forward for them. And so you really have to build in that value to remember them, to remember people with disabilities, to remember that it's not just the status quo. You've got to customize and ensure that everyone that you're trying to engage and factor and bring into your events, that they all have an experience and they all have something that they're bringing with them. We can do it successfully. It can be done. We've been doing it at JDC Events successfully, but it's because we're always thinking about the different audiences that we're bringing to the table. So that's what I would say, is just to remember to lead with empathy as you begin forward on the new pathway to begin to come together in events.
Well, that was really well said, and I couldn't agree with you more. There is not any one way to do any of this, and some combination has got to be the best strategy for everyone. Well, thank you for being with us today, and thanks to all of our listeners that join. We appreciate you taking the time to spend with us to think about how you're going to approach your events in the rest of 2022, and we will see you next time on The New Normal in Government Contracting. Thanks so much.
Thanks again.